Good afternoon, Mr. Smiley. Good afternoon. Can you tell the jury how old you are? 41 years old. You might want to bring the mic a little bit closer to you. 41 years old. Are you currently in jail? Yes. How long have you been in jail for? 9 years. What are you currently in jail for, pleading guilty to? Hired for hit, for murder. And was that for one individual or two? Two. Do you know the names of those two victims? Mr. Eric Smith and Mr. Troy Singleton. Now, you pled guilty to both of those murders for hire, is that right? Yes. For Eric Smith, who did you do that crime with? A guy by the name of Russell Allen, Dennis Crosby, Broughton, and Mosley. How about Troy Singleton? Troy Singleton, a guy by the name of eBay, a guy by the name of Tripp, Mosley, and myself. Were you hired to commit those two murders? Yes. Who hired you? Mr. Mosley. Do you know his first name? Emmanuel. I'm showing you what has been marked for identification. This is Government's Exhibit 79. Your Honor, Counsel, and I have stipulated this. This is the cooperation agreement. 79 in evidence. Do you recognize this document, Mr. Smiley? Yes. And is that the cooperation agreement that you pled guilty to? Yes. When did you plead guilty to this crime? December 2006. And you said you pled guilty to both of those murders for hire, is that correct? Yes. What's the minimum term in jail that you are facing? Life imprisonment. And the maximum term? Life. And as a result of that cooperation agreement, what's your obligation to the government? To tell the truth. What's your understanding of what the government's obligation is to you? To write a 5K1 motion to the judge. What's your understanding of what that 5K1 motion is? The judge makes a determination in the sentencing. Okay, what will that 5K letter include? My full cooperation. Would it also include your criminal history that we're about to talk about now? Yes. Do you have any promises as to what your sentence will be? No. Who is in charge of your sentence? The judge. And if you don't tell the truth, what is the sentencing you will be facing? Life imprisonment. Mr. Smiley, you said you have been in jail for this past 9 years. Is that right? Yes. Have you gotten in any trouble while you have been in jail? Yes. Can you tell the jury what that is? I had 2 or 3 fights. I cursed out an officer. I went into the shoe. What's the shoe? The box. And how long were you there for? 45 days. Is that the only time you have been in the shoe for the past 9 years? Yes. Where did you grow up, Mr. Smiley? In Manhattan. Where in Manhattan? 155th Street and 8th Avenue. Is that Harlem? Yes. Who was in your household when you grew up? My mother, my 2 sisters, and my 2 brothers. Did you go to school up in Harlem? Yes. How far did you get in school? High school. Did you finish high school? No. What grade? I dropped out in high school. What grade? 10th grade. Why did you drop out? I was dealing in the streets. Dealing what in the streets? Dealing drugs. About how old were you at that time? 15. And were you selling on your own or were you selling for somebody? I was selling for a boss. Who was that? A guy by the name of Marlon. Where did Marlon sell? on 155th Street and 8th Avenue. What types of drugs were you selling then? Crack and cocaine. You said he was the boss, is that right? Yes. So what was your role? Just to sell the drugs? On the corner? Yes. Did you ever get arrested while you worked for Marlin? Yes. How old were you then? Maybe about 16, 17. Was that your first drug arrest? Yes. Do you remember what the circumstances were? I think they closed the case. They sealed the case the first time I got caught. Is that because you were a juvenile? Yes. Do you remember how you got arrested? I sold to an undercover officer. And did you plead guilty as a juvenile? Yes. And what was your sentence? At that time, I think I got a drug program. And the time you took a drug program, did you have a drug problem? Yes. What were you using? Marijuana. After the drug program, what did you do? Did you go back to Harlem? Yes. And did you find a job? No. What did you start doing? Continue to sell drugs again. Where were you selling then? The same spot, 155th Street. Did you get arrested again? Yes. And what was that for? I believe it was for cocaine. And just in terms of crack cocaine, what quantities were you selling? Small quantities, like vials. Did there come a time when you stopped selling crack cocaine? Yes. Why was that? I was getting in trouble too many times. And before that, did there come a time when something happened to Marlon? Yes. What happened? He got killed. And as a result, did you take over the corner there at 155th and 8th Avenue? Yes. Did you do that on your own? No, 2 of my friends was with me. Were you still selling crack at that time? Yes. About how old were you at that time? About 19, 20. And how long did you sell at the corner of 155th and 8th? Until 1997. And just to be clear, when you were selling there, was it just you and 2 friends, is that right? Yes. Were you just selling to customers or were you selling weight? Just to customers. How successful were you? Not too successful. And what happened in 1997 that made you stop? I was getting in too much trouble, so I just switched over from selling crack to straight coke. Why did you make that switch? It was an easier clientele. Can you just explain to the jury what you mean by that? Well, with the crackheads, it's more kind of petty, and with the coke users, they are more professional people. When you say you were getting into trouble, what kind of trouble were you getting into when you were selling on the corner? I was getting arrested for beating up customers, things of that nature. When you said you beat up a customer, can you explain why that happened? Well, customers owe me money and they don't want to pay, and I sold to them. And were you also involved in a shooting around that time in 1996 before you made the switch to selling cocaine? Yes. Can you tell the jury what happened then? A guy stole the guy's cell phone. He asked me to ride him off a pedal bike. I told him no. He tried to take the bike from me. We fought for the bike. He pulled out a gun on me. I told him that he better shoot me since he pulled out the gun. Let me stop you right there. You said a guy took a bike from you? He tried to take it. Do you know that person's name? Yes. Who was that person? A guy by the name of Man. Did this happen around in Harlem at the time? Yes. Was he able to take your bike? No. What happened? We wrestled for the bike and I took the bike from him. Then what happened? Then I rode off on the bike and I went and got a gun. Was that after you had seen him with a gun? Yes. Where did you go and get the gun? To my house. What type of gun did you get? A 12 gauge Remington. What is that? A shotgun. Was there anything particular about that shotgun? No. And was that the only type of gun you carried back then, in 1996? Yes. What happened once you got your shotgun? I came back looking for him, and then I seen him, and then he ran in the game room. I chased him in the game room. I threatened him. What's a game room? A video arcade game room, and it was like a slash restaurant, and I chased him in there. He was hiding, and then I told him, let's have a shootout. He was scared, so I was leaving, and he tried to run behind me and shoot me. Did he shoot you? No. What did you do? I shot him. What time of day did this happen? Maybe 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Did you hit him? Was he injured? Yes. Do you know where you shot him? In the chest. And did he die? No. Were there people around when you did this? Down the block, not in the area where it happened at. Did people learn about what you had done, shooting the guy with the shotgun? Yes. Did you ever get arrested for that? No. You mentioned a guy by the name of Russell Allen. You mentioned a couple of people. Did you know him at that time? Yes. I show you Government's Exhibit 31. This is in evidence. Can you tell us about him? Yes, that's Russell Allen. How do you know him? We grew up together. He was also from Harlem, is that right? Yes. Now, the result of this shooting incident, was that one of the reasons why you stopped selling crack cocaine? No. But after that, did you start selling cocaine? Yes, I was selling cocaine in 97. How long did you sell cocaine for? From 1997 to 2003. You mentioned you also know an Emmanuel Mosley, is that right? Yes. Showing you Government's Exhibit 26. Can you tell us who that is? Yes, that's Emmanuel Mosley. How did you meet him? I met him through Les. Did you know what Les's relationship was with Mosley? He sold drugs for him. And what kind of drugs were they selling? Cocaine and crack cocaine. You said that Mr. Mosley had hired you to do those 2 murders, is that right? Yes. Can you explain to the jury the first time that you met Mosley? I met Mosley through Russell Allen. Can you describe the circumstances? He came to my house. He propositioned me 2 or 3 times about doing a murder with him, and I turned him down. The 3rd time he came, he offered me more money. He said it was a substantial amount of money involved, and I agreed to it, and then he took me and introduced me to Emmanuel Mosley. He told me this is the guy we would be doing hits for. Let me back you up there. You said the first couple of times you said no, is that correct? Yes. Who were you having that conversation with? Russell Allen. And when he said it's for Mosley, did you know who Mosley was? I never met him before. I knew him through him, but he never introduced me personally to him. He told me before that was his friend. So Russell Allen told you that was his friend? Yes. Did you know Mosley by any nickname? Dog. Dog? Yes. And you said ultimately you agreed to it, is that right? Yes. Why did you agree? Because he said it was more money involved. Who is he? Russell Allen. Okay, did he mention an amount, a number at that time? He said it was going to be anywhere between 175 and 250,000. So once you agreed with Russell Allen, did you then meet with Mosley? Yes. Can you tell us when you met him? I believe it was the same day or the next day. Do you remember where you met him? On 149th Street and 8th Avenue. Do you know if he lived there or if he was from there? Well, I know his family live in 150th Street. And at that time, did you have a discussion about the murders? No. What happened then? He just introduced me to him. Did at some point Russell Allen explain to you who the murders were for? He said that dog was going to pay us to do the murders. And did you have any information other than dog Manny Mosley was going to pay you? No. Did you know who the victims were? No. And did you learn any purpose or reason behind why these murders were to be committed? No. At some point, did you go to Queens, Mr. Smiley? Yes. Can you tell the jury how that came about? Well, after I agreed to be involved with the murders, I believe it was the next day, Russell Allen picked me up and he told me to come down to the block with him. Mosley was down there and they met us with a Jeep and they drove us out to Queens. Who is they? It was Russell Allen, Tripp, myself, and Mosley was driving. Okay, you said Tripp. Do you know who that person is? Yes, Barry Broughton. Had you met Barry Broughton before that day? Yes. How did you know him? He's like family to one of my friends. And do you know what he did for a living? Sold drugs. Showing you Government's Exhibit 28. Do you recognize that person? Yes. Who is that? That's Tripp. So you said the next day after you agreed to it, so you, Mosley, and Tripp left in the car, is that correct? Yes. Do you remember who was driving? Mosley. Do you remember what kind of car? I believe it was a Range Rover. Where did you go? To Queens. Are you familiar with Queens, Mr. Smiley? No. Do you know where you went to that day? Jamaica, Queens. And what happened once you got to Queens? We got to Queens, we parked by a lake, and after we parked by the lake, Mosley got out. He went and talked to some guy, and after he was talking to the guy, he came back to the Jeep. He told us we was going to stay in a hotel overnight. So we drove down the block, a few blocks down. We stayed in a hotel overnight until the next day. You said you went near a lake, is that right? Yes. And you saw Mosley speak to some guy? Yes. Did you later learn who that person was? Yes. Who was that person? Kenneth Supreme Mcgriff. Kenneth Supreme Mcgriff? Kenneth. Did you know who that person was? Not at the time because they was from a distance. Later on, I learned who it was. When I seen him, I recognized him. How did you recognize him? Because I seen him before. Did you know of him? Yes. What did you know that he did for a living? That he was ruthless in the streets? Showing you Government's Exhibit 32. Do you recognize that person? Yes. Who is that? Kenneth Supreme Mcgriff. Is this the person you saw Mosley speaking to near the lake? Yes. Did you ever have any conversations with Mcgriff? No. I'm also going to show you now what's been entered into evidence as Government's Exhibit 2002A, C, and D. Do you recognize that photo? Yes. What's that a photo of? That's the lake. This is 2002C. Is that where you first saw Mosley speaking to Mcgriff near there? Yes, near there. You said the first night you stayed at a hotel. What was the reason you stayed at the hotel? I don't know. Did you end up staying at a place the second night? He took us to a house across the street from the lake. When you say us, who are you talking about? Les, Tripp, and me. Who took you? Mosley. Let me show you Government's Exhibit 2002A. What's that a photo of? That's the house we stayed in. Where did you stay in that house? In a basement apartment. Now, what was the reason that was given to you as to why you needed to stay in the house? We were staying in the house because they had people out looking for the guys that we supposed to kill. Who explained that to you? Well, Les told me first, and then the guy, Divine, he brung Divine, and Divine explained things to us. He showed us pictures of the guys, and he said they had people out looking for him. When they find them, we were staying at the house close by. When they find them, we could go to the area and kill them. Had you met Divine before that? No. Did he have a nickname other than Divine? No. What's his nickname other than Divine? How about? How about? Yes. What was your understanding of who How About worked for? Supreme. When Divine explained to you they had people looking for the victims, is that right? Yes. Did you ever look for the victims? Yes. And you said, did you stay at that house for some time? Yes. Who stayed at that house with you? Les stayed there, Tripp stayed there, I stayed there, and then like 2 days later they brung TJ. Did Mosley ever stay there? No. Who is TJ? TJ was another one of the shooters. Showing you what's already been entered as Government's Exhibit 57. Who is that a photo of? That's TJ. How About said they would have people looking. Is that right? Yes. You also looked for the victims? Yes. How did you do that? How About used to drive us around because he knew the victims personally, so he used to drive us around and look for them. How often did you look for the 2 intended victims? Every day. For how long, do you know? For about a week, week and a half, somewhere around there. And were you ever with Mosley looking for the victims? Yes. And was that every day also? No, Mosley was there one time. And do you remember that one time you looked for victims with Mosley? Yes, he was in a different, separate car. Was this always in Queens? Yes. Now, you said at some point, you said How About had shown you a photo? Yes. Who did he have a photo of? E-moneybags. Was it a clear photo? It was a real tiny, small photo. It was real small. It was clear. Did you ever have a photo or see the other victim, Troy? No. Now, did there come about a time when you actually saw Eric Smith? Yes. What was his nickname? E-moneybags. Can you tell us what happened on that day? On that day, we was in a house, and I guess Divine got a call, and he said that somebody shot the victims, and he told us to get ready. So we had geared up, put on bulletproof vests, and got the guns ready that was down in the basement. And then they came and picked us in a car. Divine came and picked us up, and Tripp, Les, TJ, myself got in the car with him. He drove us to the site where the victims was at. Okay, now you said you got a phone call first, is that right? Divine. Divine got a phone call? Yes. Okay, and Divine was staying at the house? No, he came down to the house. Okay, where did you have the gun 37 in the basement? Yes. Were those your guns? No. Whose guns were they? Supreme Mcgriff. Once you were picked up, do you remember what kind of car Divine picked you up in? I believe it was a Crown Victoria. And what happened? Where did you go? We drove to the site where the victim was at, and he said that that was his Jeep. It was a silver Navigator. Who said that? Divine. Okay, so what happened? So Divine stayed in the car. We, Les, Trip, and TJ got out the car, and we started running up to the Jeep. Okay, was that E-moneybags in the Jeep? Yes. Okay, what did you do? Well, it was one person that was talking to him on the passenger side through the window, standing talking to him through the window. He ran off. TJ shot at him, and then he ran through the backyard. TJ and Les chased him, and me and Trip ran to the Jeep. What happened at the Jeep? Trip shot the driver. Do you know how many times? I'm not sure how many times, but it was around 9 times. Did you fire a gun? Yes. How many times did you shoot? Around 15 times. And that was into E-moneybags, is that right? Yes. Was he seated in the car? Yes. Do you remember what kind of gun that you had? A Tech 9. Do you remember what kind of gun Trip had? He had a 9mm handgun. Now, you said Trip had shot him first, is that right? Yes. And where did Les and TJ go? They ran through the back alley, like through the houses. Did either of them ever fire at E-moneybags? No. And did Divine ever get out of the car? No. After you fired, what did you do? Everybody ran back to the car. Where did you go? Back to the stash house. Was that the house we saw on 2002A? Yes. And what did you do with the guns? Divine came down with a bag, told us to give him all our clothes and the bulletproof vest and the guns. We gave everything to him. He put it in bags and he left with it. And did you see what he did with those guns? No. Now, just to be clear, was Mosley there at the time of this murder? No. And did you see Mosley after? Yes. When did you see him? He came to pick us up a few minutes after Divine left. What happened? He came to pick us up and drove us back to Harlem. And where did you go in Harlem? To Tripp family house. And what happened there? We split some money up. Okay, how much money? I believe it was $25,000. How much money did you get? At the time, $7,500. And who paid you? Mosley. Now, who all got paid, if you know? TJ, Trip, Les, and myself. Do you know if TJ got paid? Yes.